She'll be there for an hour, and then we're going to
Is
have.
she going to explain also the footnotes, like how to use them?
It's going to be a good workshop. Actually, you know what? It would be great if you have specific needs and wants in that hour. Send them to me, and I'll make sure that she goes over that stuff.
Okay.
Because there's a lot to go over.
Great.
Okay, and then we'll walk over and we'll go to the University Club and have fun time with all the SJs. This will be an all SJ thing. If any of you media partners want to come to that, you're welcome to. Okay, November 1st is the deadline, so that's the Thursday. So you basically have 2 weeks now to be working on your projects. November 2nd, on the Friday of the next class, on November 2nd, when we're in this room, before it's our final class before the Engine 30, we'll go to the 2-9 and have another lunch on us. You're all welcome to that. That was fun. Isn't that great?
Oh, yeah.
People stayed until 4. Crazy. It's crazy.
Wow.
Okay. So we'll have to do November birthdays. So, you know, don't hide. If you have a November birthday, would you tell me? Or do you know? That would be, I'd really appreciate it.
What if you have a June birthday, but it doesn't pertain to this class? Like, go ahead.
You're out of luck. We'll get to June. We'll be in May.
May can be June.
Okay, we'll do a summer birthday thing.
Thank you.
November 9th. So again, November 9th, get this in your calendar, don't goof it up. LA Athletic Club. I'm going to try to pay for your parking, but I don't know if I can. What the truth of the matter is that I have a budget that handles 15 fellows for 10 days. I'm going to try to stretch it because I have an impossible time when there are fabulous media partners and fabulous students saying, no, I can't pay for that lunch, put it down. You know, or, you know, no, you may not come with us somewhere. It's just not in my nature, I can't do it. So, but the truth of the matter is I have a limited budget and I don't know. So one of the things is I would like to be able to pay for parking, but I'm not sure I can, and I'll let you know. I'll let you know. But there's plenty of parking there.
Or we could support our fabulous public transit system and encourage more people to use trains and green transit and save
The Metro is
planet.
perfect for the LA Athletic Club. It's just like right up the street and takes you right back to campus. Okay.
And if you have to drive, maybe you can carpool.
So, and then on November 17th, we're going to have, I thought it'd be really fun, the last night of Engine 30 on a Saturday night to take over the LA Athletic Club. Actually has a really nice room. And we have everybody, students, you're all going to get t-shirts. I hope you got your email from Ariana. You know, we'll have swag. And look at, and just celebrate what we've done. And what's happened out of this. So if you can come, put it down for dinner in the LA Athletic Club on November 17th to say goodbye to everybody.
The last party you had there had some pretty great surprises. Are there?
Wait,
I don't have the budget for surprises.
Oh.
Maybe.
Maybe little surprises.
Maybe little surprises.
Okay. Prepare to be surprised.
Yeah, you heard from him.
Wait,
He's got to help me
how
out
do you
here.
do that?
Is Jackson Brown going to play? Is that right?
It would be really fun to repeat that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
But it ain't cheap, honey.
Oh. I thought they were your friends.
They are my friend. My friends ain't cheap. Okay, November 19th. Some of you already have all your thesis committees due, but this is the date that you're supposed to have all 3 members picked. Okay? All right. So what I'd like to do now, do you want to read? Do you want a little moment to read?
Yeah, that'd be great, actually.
Would you like reading? Okay. Have a little moment to read.
I'd be happy to be on thesis committees. You're all doing such interesting projects.
He's a professor in the architecture school, so he counts as, you know, that person who's at USC but not inside of Ann Arbor. And then what I thought we'd do is I thought, the group who's working on contested spaces stuff, stay in this room. The group who's working on,
No, we'll have to fight for it.
yes, you got it. The group who's working on arts education, go to the dining room table. The group who's working on why art happens here, which is really Chia. It is Chia and Drew. Go to the den.
And Layla. I don't know who
And Layla,
Layla's
you're kind of both. You're kind of both.
Oh. Okay, well then we'll say it.
Can I say one epiphany and then I'll let you read? Okay. And if this doesn't help you, you can say, I don't want another one of these. Whichever one says that. Two really interesting things happened to me this week. One of them came out of the lunch that we had last week. We were sitting around and I started thinking very seriously about how to monetize this. And I was sitting sort of in a cluster with Drew and Tammy and Gabby, and there was a group, you were there too. And working on the idea of, Drew had this idea of Engine 30 as an AP for arts, an Associated Press for Arts, that this would become a way, not to be agents for people, individuals, but to have a resource where where you could shape stories, work stories, get stories by who's ever available. Out of Getty Fellowships, out of you, out of whatever, the way it's working actually right now. I took that idea to Jonathan Tappan, who is the head of the Annenberg Innovation Lab, and who is absolutely brilliant at money. Brilliant. I mean, he's hauled in grants from Cisco and Mattel and IBM and the Gates Foundation, and I mean, he's you know, he's a hippie who knows how to raise money. It's really, really fun. And I presented him that idea, and he really took to it. But he shaped it in a different way. He said, really think about it as a ProPublica for arts journalism. Because what we're doing is we're doing stories, and I hope that out of the conversations you've had with Doug, and you know, seriously, he talked to you from 15 minutes to an hour. That's a lot of time out of his very, very busy week. To go deep, to find what it is that you connect to in the stories that you're telling. What ProPublica does is it tells stories that matter to each individual. They're deep, they're long form, and they have context. So he said, you know, I think you could get a $1 million MacArthur grant. I mean, he's quite serious, and I'm going to try to do this, in which there are these partnerships, and that stories get told by people who care about arts journalism. This is not about regular, normal journalism, actually, because that's out there. We have a niche that no one else is doing. So I got this very interesting paper, which just fell on the floor, and anybody who wants to look at it, but I read it. It's actually sort of confidential. It's not yet published, written by the Gates Foundation and by the James Knight Foundation, called Deepening Engagement for Lasting Impact. And what they're writing about is also how it applies to how do you get money, and it applies to, in interesting ways, how do you make the impact, how do you do the engagement effect. That piece you did, lest you think you have not made progress, trust me, each one of your stories from where you started to where you are right now has gone through a process of data gathering and of community engagement. As you go out there, keep your mind always on who are the communities of interest. When these stories, and if these stories get published or produced, suddenly it's not just Sam writing about Grand Park. It's Sam in connection with policymakers, urban planners, the buildings around that, the architect. I mean, all of a sudden, the common public, if she's done her job right, in conjunction with everybody else, will have identified points of engagement. So suddenly, 800,000 people are interested in a story which, if it had run, you know, in any particular one media outlet, may get only a couple of thousand. because those people are also pitching in and telling their stories, and you're making it possible for them to do that. This is what was beyond this was interesting is they had this pyramid, and I called Doug and I said, "Oh my God, Doug, it's your bloody pyramid." Framed a little bit differently, but very similarly. And what is interesting about the pyramid is that we often think of starting at the top in journalism with the idea, the story. That where you are right now is where we usually start. And so that was interesting that these things parallel. But the next epiphany was for me is that what this idea, this ProPublica idea, and this idea of going deep and caring, really said to me that what we're doing is providing context. I'm going to use one example. Laurie Ochoa keeps talking about Deborah Vankin's piece on vandalism and the signs. Deborah Vankin is a reporter for the LA Times. That piece has been published. Christopher Knight has written reviews about the graffiti show at MoCA. That piece has been published. Christopher Hawthorne there, the LA Times architecture critic, has written many stories about public space and architecture and Grant Park. That story has been published. What we're doing in Engine 30, and that's why I'm saying, like, it's really important to understand, these come out of a project called Engine 30. What we're doing is saying, and what kind of added value can we do? What context is there? What stories come from KPCC? What stories come from KCET and from KPCC that why should they languish? We add on and present context. So your piece on decentralization and on vandalism and on battlegrounds is not a singular act. It's an act in the context of what already exists. What we're really doing is giving further life by also hooking up with the communities who care about these issues, so that Engine 30, let's say, becomes a place where you know you can go to keep topics sort of alive. Do you see what I'm saying? So when the Getty Fellows come in, and that's why on this point of boundaries and you are the authority, they may pick one of your areas. You're doing the research. You've had the luxury of August 31st to now to start thinking about stuff, to start doing the hard work. They may want to piggyback with you or have questions for you about Los Angeles, about what's here. So that's kind of, does that help you think about where you are and what you're doing and how this is, what this is? You can say something.
Well, I feel like there's constantly this talk of these things will live on, it's not going to die, it's not, I'm just, how does a story, I don't know, because like when you approach a story, you're taking in my mind, you're taking a snapshot of as it is at that moment, you know what I mean? So, I mean, unless, like for instance on a written story, unless you're constantly revising that written story, and then that begs the question of, do you have time? Are you getting paid to do this, et cetera?
Right,
You know what I mean?
Well, I think part of that is also going to be the visualizations and the tools and the things that we're going to do with this. I mean, that's the sort of 5 to 7 people who are good at that stuff. If they can find ways to translate that kind of thing, so that, Robin and Max are working on a brain map for neuroscience. They're doing the data gathering, so that you take your mouse and you go across the brain, and you will see how dance affects the brain. But what will pop up is also articles about, well, what does arts education in dance do for people? That's in perpetuity and can be added on to. I mean, yes, that article should have a context. Your cinematography thing will have a context. It's like, but can we provide a framework in which it's easier to find and it's in association with other things? I mean, that's sort of the novelty is actually Melanie Sill's idea of open journalism. Can it be done? Can we reach across and can reach across and say, hey, that brain thing's kind of cool, and in fact, we've been doing something sort of like that. Can we have access to that? And I'm saying yes, let's try it. You know,
So it's not necessarily the website of Engine 30, excuse me, that will keep new content coming. In other words, the content will come from the outreach from Engine 30 to media partners.
right,
Optimally.
right, right. And ProPublica, if you look it up, sort of works
Okay.
in the same sort of
Yeah,
way. It's been a successful, interesting model, and so, you know,
Wherefore the MacArthur, is the MacArthur grant?
this is a mythical thing. I mean, I'm gonna try.
But where would it come in, to whom would it go, what would it fund, and can I have some?
Yes. My question for myself is, you know, there's so much that is broken about journalism right now. And the legacy media has so many incredible, remarkable people inside of it who are under enormous constraints. And here's a university that has the luxury of space, time, the ability to be kind of Switzerland, to gather people together if they're willing to come. I mean, that's the amazing thing about having Tammy and Drew and me here in conjunction with all of this. What can we do together? What can we do together to serve the public, to keep journalism alive? So yes, you by being in on the ground floor are a charter member of this thing. You know, do I know that Engine 30 is going to survive past, you know, this class? I don't know the answer to that question. But some iteration of it will. I mean, we're just going to keep going until we can figure this thing out. So I really welcome anybody, and that's the other thing, is to remember too that of the fellows, people like Suzanne Wu and Marissa Glock, and there are a couple others, are there's a head of an advertising. Paul Pearson has his own advertising company. These people understand spreadable media, social media, marketing, branding. Layla, that was something I think from your proposal about online and social media, I would say you know, that's another kind, when you're hanging out at Engine 30, that's what you're hanging out and doing. You know, learn from them how to do this. Learn from them how to do this. We're gonna ask Suzanne if she'll take on marketing and spreading Engine 30, starting Monday. You know, if you see that going on Basecamp, make time for it if it's of interest to you. Pay attention to it. You know, it's something, it's just like doing a good treatment or pitch. Again, like, you know, these guys get 30, 50 pitches, you know, a day. How are you gonna make yours come to the top? It's gotta be a solid idea, it's gotta be a grabber. You've got to know how to do those things, thanks to marketing pitches. So, you know, it's just an opportunity, I think an extraordinary opportunity, to be in a professional circumstance. And to be doing this stuff for real. Do we know what's absolutely gonna happen? No. Which is why I referred to that book, The New Culture of Learning, because that is the way it is now. And actually, it's really fun. So the reason why I say it's time to play, it actually is time to play.
I have 3 quick things to say because I was thinking about what you were just saying. It's really important to start thinking before you get out into the world of journalism, to start thinking about branding yourself, of what is your thing that you're offering. Because a lot of editors will go to you if you're that person. You know, if there's a story about arts education and you write a lot about it, and you're like, oh my God, Elena, this is a story for you. You know what I mean? So that's one thing to think about. Another thing to think about is for the stories that end up on the blog site, use that as your pitch to editors. You know, when you pitch to an editor, like, I've got this great story, here's an example of what I'm working on, that's a good way to do it. And also look at the stories that publications are doing. If, like you were saying, if someone has done a story on street art and then you have a lot of photos about it, contact that reporter or that editor and say, I've got this great stuff that complements your story. Like if you have a video, if you have any multimedia stuff, Because so many different places right now don't have so many different outlets don't have the money to create that stuff on their own. So if you create it and then you just say you can have this for some cash or whatever, and then they'll probably buy it. And that this brings me to my third point, which is when I went to Annenberg, I sold most of my stories. Like after, I would just hold on to them, and even after the fact, I mean, it would be past, you know, the time that something had happened. I could still sell them, you know. So just hold on to your stories, and you'll be able to publish them somewhere else.
I wanted to say something too, just picking up on the thing of Sean, your question is, I mean, I think the afterlife of what we do will depend on how successfully, I mean, how good these pieces are, and how successfully we engage people and archive them, but it's already happening so much. You know, in the old days, you would write your stories, and they would get printed, and they would go to a library, and a librarian would clip them out, you know, in the building, in-house, and put them in a little, you know, middle envelope, and stick them in an old file cabinet, and we call that the morgue. I think every newspaper would refer to that. And that term wasn't accidental. You know, stories would go there to die. And sometimes, you know, then, I mean, in the old days, they used to have to be on microfiche, which was this horrible, you know, black and white crinkly tape that you'd go and wind on the spools. And sometimes you'd get a phone call and somebody would say, hey, I remember this story that you guys ran 5 years ago about such and such, and I think you wrote it. And you'd sort of, you know, flip through your mental Rolodex and you'd say, well, actually, it was my colleague, and then you'd go down and maybe you'd make a photocopy and you'd send it to them. Well, now, as we know, I mean, you know, stories will get out there, and the minute it sort of gets, you know, published online, it does begin to take on multiple lives of its own. You know, I see stuff sometimes that I write turn up as a Wikipedia footnote, you know, a few days later. And sometimes, you know, you'll do a post and it'll disappear into the ether, and then all of a sudden, you know, if it's, or you know, a tweet or whatever it is, and then it'll